Welcome all to another episode of Boardroom to Backend podcast. What does it take to lead technology strategy across both Fortune 500 consulting and the world of higher education? This is what we are going to find out this week as I sit down with Brad Englert, the founder of Brad Englert Advisory and an author, advisor, and technologist. Brad worked for Accenture for 22 years, including 10 years as a partner. He then served the University of Texas at Austin for 8 years, including 7 years as the Chief Information Officer. Prior to Accenture, Brad held managerial positions in payroll, human resources, and labor relations at the Internal Revenue Service and was a high school teacher in Maitland, New South Wales, Australia. Brad earned a Master's of Public Affairs degree from the University of Texas at Austin and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Social Sciences with honors and distinction from Shimmer College, which is now the Shimmer Grade Books School at North Central College in Naperville, Illinois. Today, it is an honor to have Brad as my guest here. Brad, a very warm welcome to this podcast, and thank you so much
for inviting me. Thanks for inviting me. Great.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Brad, career journey spans across the IRS, Accenture, and UT Austin. So, let's start at the very beginning and try to understand about what truly motivated you to begin your career in public service.
Well, I think it actually started in high school. I was in student government from my sophomore year to my senior year and was elected class president my senior year. So I just enjoyed the public service roles. And when I returned to America from Australia, I joined the Internal Revenue Service and found it to be a very professionally run organization. They encouraged me to go to get my master's degree, which I was able to do part-time, going to school, working full-time, going to school part-time. But I realized that in order to really work well in the public sector, I need to get some private sector skills, especially technology skills. And so I surveyed big companies, and I found Arthur Andersen had a 3-year training program, apprenticeship program. So someone with a liberal arts undergraduate degree and a master in public policy, they would teach me how to code, design programs, manage coders and designers, and later run $100 million projects with 200 people. I did go back to public sector after private sector. It just took me 25 years.
So that's very, very interesting. And I like the fact, how you wanted to kind of get the private sector experience to kind of come and do the public service, right? You also spent time as a teacher in Australia. And how did that international experience early in your career shape your worldview and your overall approach to leadership?
Well, first of all, it was a great way to see how the world views the United States. And this was the mid-'70s, and we were just concluding the Vietnam War. And, a lot of Australians served there. So there's a lot of clear thinking of how the world pictures us. And that was very helpful. In terms of being a teacher, it's very much, you have to be excited, passionate about it. You have to come to the table every day with interesting topics, and the lower classes, the 9th and 10th form, were all boys. So you had to control the room.
Yeah.
And my 5th and 6th form, they were girls and boys, so that was a lot easier.
Got it. And but there's some key leadership lessons that you took away while you served as a teacher there.
Yeah, preparation is very key. Curiosity, always learning, and just being able to share that excitement with your students.
I think that those are some key points, even when it comes to the team management. Constantly bringing new insights to work, keeping your team motivated and inspired. I think those are really some key lessons.
I mean, a key example would be this 9th grader came up in the playground and said, "What's going to happen in science today?" And I said, "I'm not going to tell you. You have to wait till you get there." So, and that's fun.
Yeah. So you have to kind of keep them curious and make sure that they are still interested to come and learn from you, right? So
That's right.
yeah, that's smart. So now, again, when you started your career with the IRS, you were in a totally different function, like managing labor relations and HR, right? And technologies on one side, but like handling the HR is a totally different craft. So, how did that transition happen? Or what were some of the learnings in that role as well?
Well, as the payroll officer, we had the opportunity to automate from punch cards to online data entry. So this is early 80s, and I had 20 timekeepers who would get paper timesheets and write on cards 8888, and they would go get key punched, and then we would run payroll for 6,000 people every 2 weeks. We had a new mini computer, and we're going to do online data entry. So this programmer shows up. I'm the user, and he's got the white short sleeve shirt, the skinny black tie, the big thick black glasses, and yes, the plastic pencil protector. And I said, I would like the screen to default all eights for 2 weeks. So if someone has perfect attendance, my people could just hit enter and go to the next one instead of typing 8888. And he said, no, I can't do it. And then he scurried off and came back the next week and said, okay, I can do it.
Okay.
So he was taught to say no to anything I asked for, go ask the boss, and if the boss approved it, then come back. And that's when I realized that if I didn't get some technical skills, some guy like that would hold me hostage for my entire career.
Yeah.
In the world of labor relations, it's all about conflict being inevitable. You have management, you have labor, you're dealing with people. And I think my biggest lesson there was do not let it fester. Have an action orientation. So if there's a conflict, step in, meet with management, meet with labor, and try to get to a resolution in a timely way. Later on in my career, someone who worked for me appreciated that I didn't let conflicts fester, that I just nipped them in the bud. And I thought that's something I learned through labor relations.
It's very interesting how different experiences working for different style of the organizations can actually set you up for long-term success in a totally different industry. Um, Appreciate that sharing that insight. Uh, Now you said that you started with what was then the Arthur Anderson Consulting, and probably I'm assuming that is what actually later on became Accenture for you in your career, right? So, and staying there for 22 years is definitely not a small feat. So what kept you energized during your time there, and especially to your decade as a partner?
Well, number one, you're working with the most successful organizations on the planet. So it's the Fortune 500, it's large public sector organizations, and these people are at the top of their game. And so to be able to work with clients like that with world-class skills and bring your team to the table with world-class skills, because I was surrounded by excellent people, you became successful over and over again. About 80% of Accenture's clients are repeat customers. Well, or if not higher. And it's like, well, why is that? Because success breeds success. And often I would have success with a client 1 year, and maybe 5 years later, they would call back and say, hey, we have another project. Can you come help us with that? Just seeing them successfully change for the better is very rewarding. The other piece of the culture of the firm was a very strong emphasis on mentoring and coaching. And even as a senior partner, I was expected to be a mentor, and I still had a mentor. So I was expected to be a mentor and be mentored. And other part of the culture is continuous learning. We have a training center outside of Chicago that trains thousands of people from around the world. And my last month with the firm, I taught a project management class in the training center with several other partners, 200 aspiring managers from around the world. And it's just so much fun to do that. So it's just that focus on successful clients, working with the best in the world, having the best in the world on your team, and then helping grow the firm so it gets bigger. So I started, there were 40,000 consultants. There are now 700,000 people working for Accenture.
Was there anything, working in such high pressure client service model, was there learnings that helped you prepare for your leadership role in higher education?
Well, there were three principles that I come to realize apply to all authentic business relationships. And that's public sector, private sector, wherever. Number one is understanding their goals and aspirations. So it's meeting with your client and understanding, what are you trying to achieve? And then how can I help you? And if we can't help, maybe I know someone who can help. At the university, it would mean meeting with my peers across the university and understanding what are their goals and aspirations. A perfect example is the vice president for public safety. It wasn't if there'd be a problem, it's when there would be a problem, and how do we work together to solve that problem. And his team included the police department, et cetera. We had a shooting, we had a bomb scare, and then we practiced once a year on some catastrophic event. So we practiced ice storm, we practiced the networks down, we practiced a hurricane that knocked out buildings, a power outage. And you know what? A year after we practiced power outage, we had a power outage. We generate our own power. We're backed up by an energy company. Both failed. But we knew, we had the generators at the data centers, and we had practiced, what would happen. Our emergency operations centers all had copper lines in case the network was down. So, and we would test those every 90 days. So just getting out of your office and going asking, what are their goals and aspirations and how can I help? Once you know you can help someone, the second principle is set and manage expectations. And I'll be honest, I was better at this later in my career than I was early in my career. And I got much better at it. And just, articulating as a direct report what you want from your boss. What does the boss want from you? Have that two-way conversation. When I was the boss, I welcomed that discussion. And then setting the expectations, not just once a year in an annual review, but continually through the year, and reprioritize. I had a boss who was a type A personality boss. This was at the firm. And everything sounded urgent. So one day I was trying to leave at the end of the day, meet my wife for dinner, and the phone rings. It's the boss. Brad, I need a white paper. A white paper. And I literally said, whoa. I didn't say no, because that would have upset her. But I said, whoa, when do you need this white paper? Sounded like tomorrow. I said, well, let me check my calendar. I need it in 2 weeks. Okay. How many pages do you want this white paper to be? 3 pages. I was thinking 10. Do you have an example of white paper that I could look at? Oh, yeah. Ask David. I did one on XYZ Corp 10 years ago. Well, guess what? I went home. Now, before I learned to say whoa, I would have called my wife and canceled dinner, upsetting her and me. I would have stayed up all night working on a 10-page paper, delivered it the next day, and she would have yelled at me because it didn't meet her expectations. So just learning to say whoa gives you a little mental space and time to truly understand what is being asked. And the third principle I learned is genuinely care for their success. And when I got to the university, I met with this professor I had known 15 years later. We worked on a statewide network. He was an engineer, crusty old guy. And I said, okay, give me some advice. He goes, get out of the office and tell people you give a damn. And that was the best advice, because especially in a university where you have consensus building decision making, you can't be hiding behind your computer screen all day. You have to get out there and meet with people. So I think understanding people's goals and aspirations, setting and managing expectations, and genuinely caring about their success helps you in as a consultant, helps you as working in an organization, and frankly, at the end of the day, is more rewarding.
Super. That was really insightful. So I'm sure, having spent close to about 2 decades at Accenture, you would have seen a lot of transformations as a technology consulting company. And was there a few transformative moments or projects that you undertook and that kind of pushed you out of your comfort zone?
Well, the firm is known for giving you stretch roles. So you're often given these roles where you stretch. But probably the one that I remember the most was a large Research One university, 50,000 students, 4,000 faculty, 21,000 staff, and they were implementing a new payroll system, financial system, and this affects everybody because almost every student is a student worker or whatever. And I got the call because they were in trouble. They had missed a payroll deadline. They were actually paying people cash out of the back of armored cars, armored trucks. It had bad press, so it was in the newspaper. The board of trustees was upset, and they actually had hired Accenture, but they weren't using Accenture the way they should. They were using Accenture more as a body shop, just supplemental skills. Instead of what we're really good at, which is project management and leading the way, and change management, organizational change management. So I met with the provost and the CFO, and I said, after studying the environment, I said, you have all the pieces to be successful. I know we can be successful. And they said, okay, well, we want you to serve in the client role. We want you to be on the university side, and then you interact with the Accenture partner. I was a partner then. You interact with the Accenture partner and bring the best to the table. Being on the inside, I knew who was available and who wasn't. And I'd say, where's Christy? I want Christy here on Monday. Christy showed up on Monday. And we slowly, so this was October. By March, we hit a major milestone. And we're on our way to October go live. And it was just clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. And we got to October, and we had all the criteria for going live, about 30 criteria to go live. Most of them were green, no reds, meaning stop, but there were like 7 or 8 yellows. And it was like, okay, there's too much uncertainty here to risk a payroll conversion in October. I remember it was late at night, and I called the chief financial officer at home, and I said, I'm looking at this, and I think we should hold and reschedule the conversion. And he trusted us. Unfortunately, the fallback date was Thanksgiving, and no one really wanted to work on Thanksgiving. Yeah. So I sat down with the payroll officer, and we actually found another date that was only 3 weeks out. And it allowed us to knock off all those yellows. So by the time we had conversion weekend, they were all green. And honestly, it was the most boring go live of a payroll system I ever witnessed. And later, the CFO and provost talked to me about that. And they said this really showed the maturity of their organization because they had courage to halt and not go when they weren't ready. And in the past, they did go when they weren't ready, and that got them in trouble. And they trusted me, which was great. So I had great leadership support there.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that story. So it looks like you have some kind of deeper connection with the education from early age onwards. So what was one single factor that prompted your move from shifting from a global consulting firm to a university environment? Because it is a kind of a major change, though you might have worked for the universities as a client partner from Accenture, but actually getting into that environment, the culture is different and the technologies that you are dealing may be different. So what really prompted that move for you?
Well, at Accenture, for about half my career, I was working in higher ed. So my clients were University of Illinois, Michigan, Columbia, Vanderbilt, Cal State, Texas A&M. A lot of it were ERP implementations. So I was kind of accustomed to work with big Research One universities. And I happily retired from Accenture at 51. Most partners retire at 50. So it's kind of a young person sport. My wife and I remodeled our home, and literally the month we finished remodeling, I got a call from the chief financial officer at the University of Texas at Austin. And of course, it's my alma mater. And he said, the president wants an IT strategy. We've never had one. And he'd like someone from outside the university who knows higher ed. Well, that's you. It's like, yeah, that is me. So, and it was hour a week pro bono. So they're too cheap to pay for my dry cleaning or my parking. And we started in the fall and got to some of the first meetings, and there was no plan to do the plan. And some of our meetings did not have agendas. So you have all these really smart people in the room, deans, vice presidents, faculty, students, and there was no plan for the plan. And after about a month or two of that, I went to the CFO. I said, with all due respect, I'm not coming anymore. And he goes, well, what should we do? I said, look, organizations have done IT strategies for many years. You actually issued a request for proposal 5 years ago for an IT strategy. Accenture bid on it, and we were down selected with another firm. I have that proposal. Why don't we follow that plan to do the plan, which is proven? And I was bid half-time as a partner, so you need to pay me half-time to work on the plan. And I need a really good strategic thinking manager, and 2 analysts. That's what we proposed. So we started in January, and we talked to 2, 3, almost 400 people on campus. We had focus groups of students, undergraduate, graduate students, faculty, staff, all the deans, all the vice presidents, the provost, of course, the president. And out of that data gathering, we did what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are our opportunities, and what are our threats. Traditional SWOT analysis. And the opportunities were very clear. Number one, we need IT governance. No one knows how decisions are made, why they're made, who makes them. And they actually had 11 committees on campus all doing some sort of IT governance. They just weren't connected. And sometimes a boss would be on a committee, so there'd be some gravitational pull. So we called it the constellation of governance. And we took a copy of IT governance. It's a Harvard Business Review classic book. And in IT governance, Wheel and Ross are the authors. They said you need strategic decision-making, operational, and technical. Well, we had none of those. So we established operational decision-making. So all the business owners would meet once a month to talk about what are the needs of the administrative systems. Students and faculty would meet once a month to talk about what are the needs in the classroom. And then the technical people on campus would meet and discuss what are the needs on campus for technology, especially centrally supported. And then quarterly, we would meet with the strategic committee, which is the president, the provost, CFO, 3 deans, big school, middle-sized school, small school, and a student rep, and the head of the high-performance computing center. And we would say, okay, at the beginning of the fiscal year, here are our priorities. Here's our capital budget, which they didn't have one before. Here's our operating budget. Are you okay with these priorities? And they would say, yes. And then quarterly, we'd give them updates on the progress. And a lot of it was modernizing a lot of legacy, on-premise, old 8 to 10-year-old servers technology. And we did that with the input from governance. So we had this horrible learning management system, kind of a product, very kludgy. The students referred to it as clunky. It was clunky, and you could not securely connect email to this product, which is unacceptable. And the vendor did not care about our success. The vendor would show up once a year for their maintenance check, and it was always 10% more than the prior year. And they thought it would be too hard for us to move. So they just took advantage of us and thought, oh, the switching costs would be too much. Well, guess what? We got students and faculty together. We went to the marketplace. We evaluated 15 learning management systems, and we picked a new, modern, next generation learning management system. And when we took that to the strategic advisory group, the president said, well, what do the students and faculty think? Well, sir, they unanimously endorsed the decision to move to this new product. And it was like, okay. And that transition took 2 years because we're so big, 54,000 students. It's just, some courses are only taught every other year.
Right.
But the joy we had when we were able to let that other vendor go, and I don't think he ever realized why we fired them. They just didn't care. And I was working with the vice provost who was wanting to change how curriculum is delivered, and she needed this new tool. And her organization, which helps faculty in the classroom with technology, and mine worked together for every department on campus over 2 years and helped them make the transition. The good news is the students loved it. So when they were in a course with a new product that would pull, they'd want all the other courses to come over.
Yeah.
And at the end, an email was sent to the president, copied the vice provost and me, and I literally covered my eyes. I thought, I'm going to get fired. This cannot be good. And it was from all the department contacts thanking us for both our organizations working together to make it such a smooth transition, including me asking the vendor to add things or change things so the product would work at an organization at our scale. And of course, the vendor knew if they helped us be successful, they would sell to all the other Research One universities, which is exactly what happened. We moved 10 years ago. Well, they've all moved over now. I still talk to the senior vice president of sales. We talk frequently because he would call me once a month and just ask, how's it going? And he said, I've got a whole team ready here. If you have any problems, you just pick up the red phone and call me. That's someone who genuinely cares about your success.
Right. And when did this transition begin? Like, when did you start this transition at UT Austin?
It was about 10 years ago. Yeah. Probably 2013 to 2015 is when we made the move. And then what followed was student email, which was custom built, 18 years old.
Yeah.
If you're a student, you had a maximum of 50 emails, faculty 100. So to get the next one, you had to delete one.
Yeah.
Unacceptable. So we moved students to UT branded Gmail with extra privacy protections. We moved faculty and staff to Teams, which really served us well during the pandemic. We moved to Box for file sharing. We use ServiceNow for the help desk. We used Qualtrics, which is a very secure survey tool that meets all the federal requirements for privacy, et cetera. So over 8 years, we moved as much to the cloud as we could. But each one of those took 2 years because we're like an aircraft carrier. It takes a while to turn.
Yeah.
But with the participation of those on campus, the students called the student email references. They called Arizona State and, they said, we cannot use this other product. We have to use this product. It was that, Workday HR Payroll. We moved to Workday HR Payroll. And when March 2020 arrived, My successor was able to increase the VPN, increase Zoom, and 70,000 people went online to do teaching, learning, research, and work. And that just couldn't have happened my first year in 2009.
Wow, wow. I think that's a great success story there. And I'm sure like it has been probably one of the most rewarding and challenging part of you being the CIO there as well, right? So,
Well, it's the scale. We have 250,000 devices hooked to the network every day. We have 100 gig statewide network that connects to Internet 2. We have a high performance computing center that has 15 different high performance computers. So it's just the scale is pretty amazing.
so since you have had the exposure to work for the higher education sector as well as in the other corporate industries, do you see any difference between crafting an IT strategy in a university setting vis-a-vis the corporate world? How do you compare that?
You know, there are a lot of similarities.
Hmm.
The methodology is very similar. Private sector, public sector hired, you're going to do a SWOT analysis. You're going to analyze what your peers are doing. You're going to interview the organization to find out what the priorities are. You're going to look at what the mission and vision and strategies are for the organization. And most organizations have that on their website. You know, they know what their mission is. They know where they want to be in 5 years. That's their vision. And then, you know, what are some of the business strategies they're pursuing? I think the private sector angle is there's more of a profit motive that you need to be concerned about. But all the other steps in the IT strategy planning process are really very similar.
Any key differences at all that you would want to kind of mention, or like you don't see anything that are significant?
Yeah, I think just the return on investment calculations,
Okay.
you know, I think that's required in a business that you don't really, you know, you can do some back of the envelope, but if you need to replace the learning management system, you have to replace it. When we moved from copper wires to voice over IP,
Yeah.
you know, it saved money, but, you know, we had to do it. Our vendor was going away.
Right. Right. And Brad, so again, like whether it was your consulting or whether your role as a CIO for UT Austin, in the technology space, you always have to kind of balance innovation and modernization with also continuing to support some of the legacy systems, right? So, how do you make those choices, right? And what are some of the principles that has worked well for you?
Well, I think the key to success is steady changes over time. And when your projects take 2 years each to implement, you know, you need to get that buy-in from leadership way before then. And I think our process of annually updating our IT priorities, aligning our capital budget, and then being held accountable at the end of the year for achieving that. And leadership was good about helping us decide how fast to go. And so that thing I mentioned where some classes are only taught every other year,
Mm-hmm.
that's leadership talking. I don't know that as the IT guy, but they know that.
Yeah.
And so I think having that transparency and visibility, ability to change when needed, you know, on that annual cycle is, but, you know, steady change, I think, is the way to go.
Okay, got it. And so, when you are especially dealing with creating a good student experience and you are dealing with digital transformation, right? So, cybersecurity is of utmost importance there. How have you actually prioritized that, and like how much of weightage was there when you are making some decisions?
Well, I would say it was our highest priority was the chief information security officer and his team did not report to me. They reported to the chief financial officer, and I was perfectly fine with that because I wanted them to hold us accountable as much as anyone else on campus. And they were able to create a tool through big data tools that they could see across the network a social security number. They could find a credit card number, and they could isolate that machine and quarantine it within seconds. They were proactive, and no new technology was implemented without them being part of this selection process. And they would help us, advise us as we implemented. A good example is my first year, 2009, we did not have all our laptops encrypted. It wasn't quite as popular way back then.
Yeah.
We had 12,000 laptops, 1,100 go missing, lost, or stolen every year. So it was imperative that we encrypt them. And so we had leadership make the decision and say to campus, we need 100% compliance. The technical organization that made technical decisions, they helped pick the software along with the security office. And then we rolled that out. It got down to about 50 faculty members who didn't want to change. And they're the same ones who took the whiteboards out of the office and put blackboards in to use chalk. And the president was, just to show how supportive, he said to the chief information security officer, just tell them we're going to turn them off the network if they don't encrypt their laptop. And of course, that got the remaining 50. For students, we had to implement multi-factor. And they grumbled about it because it's kind of a pain.
Yeah.
But we were losing, people were fishing for payroll checks, and, it was kind of the wild, wild west. So we had to do that, even though it wasn't popular. And we had to explain it to people. And so I wrote a blog once a week for 8 years. I did that because I wanted to talk to my 330 people in central IT and say, here are the priorities, here's where we're headed, here are our values, because we articulated the values of the organization, which came out of the IT strategy.
Right.
Transparency, honesty, accountability, family first were our values.
Yeah.
And I wrote several times about the progress we're making towards encryption, why we are encrypting, why it's a compliance issue, not an IT issue. And that helps send the message without the grapevine sending the message. It not only went to 330 people on my organization, it went to 300 people outside across campus who were interested in IT at UT, and some campuses in different parts of the country. They just wanted to know what we were doing. And it was a two-way communication, so staff could respond back. Brad, you wrote, someone had 15-year service. That's great, but it takes 6 months to get their PIN. Oh, I didn't know that. We're a big university. We're a slow bureaucracy, That's ridiculous, what message are you sending? So because someone had the courage to just speak up, we nipped it in the bud and took care of it. But I think we are attacked, 24 state actors, Eastern European bad guys. So it's a 24/7, defense mode.
Yeah, agreed. So, you wrote a very, very important technology wave, the wave of the cloud, right? So I would say from 2009 to 2020. And at least the last 6-7 years was the cloud transformation era, I would say. And today we all live in the another huge wave of AI, right? So what would you have done, say, today if you are the CIO of the UT and how would you have seen AI helping the students or the university itself?
Sure. Well, I live in Austin, and I still talk to a lot of people at the university, including the CIO, and they have put an emphasis on using Copilot. Everyone has access to Teams, and so just coming up with some best practices and the like, but they're, they're jumping in. This was the year of AI at the university, so there's a lot of work done in the area, including research and such. Also, they're working on an AI tutor that I'm really excited about because, this would allow, it's kind of a dream. How do you individualize tutoring for 54,000 students? I mean, it's crazy, but they're working on it. It's called UT Sage. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of potential. They put policies in place of when's appropriate to use in the classroom and what guardrails to put on there. But they're very proactive, and I'm really pleased with that.
Now I want to kind of switch to one of the most important aspects of your career and also your personality. You are also an author, right? So what inspired you to start writing, and what exactly was the theme that you were trying to kind of pursue when you started out this?
Sure. Well, I always enjoyed mentoring and coaching, and as I mentioned earlier, expected with the firm. When I got to the university, the central IT group had a culture that was more fire drill and heroics. So they were rewarding heroics and fire drills. But what the campus wanted from us was more proactive customer service. So I had to work with my direct reports to say, how do we change the culture? I don't want to reward heroics anymore. I want to reward proactive customer service. And I would share stories from my past at the firm of, how do you interact with your people who report to you, your direct reports? How should you interact with your supervisor, me? What should you expect from your teams? Because I can't do this all myself. I need all of you to align to the new values. And so they enjoyed the stories. And so when I retired again from the university, I just thought, well, I'm still mentoring one or two people a year, but that doesn't scale very well, and I can't clone myself. So how can I package the stories in a way that would help a lot of people, especially early in their career or mid-career? And so I found a publisher, and the editor said, okay, Brad, just inventory all your stories. We'll figure it out later. And so I came up with 40 or 50 stories, and we just sat back on a whiteboard and said, okay, you have stories about working with your boss, working with direct reports, working with executive leaders, and working with all your staff. Those are those relationships close to you. And that became the internal sphere of influence. And then I had stories about customers, peers and influencers, and strategic vendor partners. And the three principles of know their goals and aspirations, set and manage expectations, and genuinely care were the common themes across all those areas. But the customers, peers and influencers, and vendor partners were my external sphere of influence. I don't meet with them as often. And so what I would do is and then she said, don't write a page till you have the full outline, which spoke to me, because you don't write a program without a good design. You don't build a house without a blueprint. So we worked together on the full outline, and but it was really wanting to help people. Sometimes they hide behind their computer. They think maybe the boss doesn't want to tell them what they want, and they might be scared, or it's like okay to ask. And I had two other phrases I used, which is people are not mind readers. So if you're the boss, you need to tell people what you want. And then, you got to ask for what you want. Stop. If you don't use your words, I can't help you, And so encouraging people that it's okay, and creating a culture and an organization where it's okay to ask questions and raise concerns. But some bosses are good at communicating expectations, and frankly, some are not good at it. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to ask, and that's okay.
Got it. So I definitely want to kind of drop a link to buy the book in my podcast here.
Actually, I will send you a customized link that I'll send
Okay.
it to my website with a free sample of the book, how
Okay.
to buy the book, and then how to schedule time on my calendar. I'll send that to you.
That would be really awesome. I mean, I can include that as part of the notes to this podcast. So, along with that, I just want to kind of get what would be one message that you would say that people would get out of reading that book? Like, I understand the theme of the spheres of influence that you are trying to kind of address there. Is there one message that like people think that they would get when they start reading the book?
Yeah, I would compare it to what's traditionally known as networking,
Hmm.
and which tends to be superficial. And I've been to networking events. I have no customer that
Yeah.
I've ever had come from a networking event. I was at one. I had a stack of cards, and a month later, I got an email from someone I had a card
Yeah.
asking me to donate to their not-for-profit. It's like, I don't even know you. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
And so it's really about prioritizing your business relationships. Your boss is easy, right? You know who your boss is. You have direct reports, that's a no brainer. You know who your direct reports are. Your customers, you don't have to meet with all of them.
Hmm.
Who are your biggest, best customers, and focus on them? And
Hmm.
so it's strategic and intentional reaching out to people. Same thing with peers and influencers. If your organizations work together a lot, like I did with public safety, you meet more frequently, maybe once a month.
Hmm.
With vendors, I would do a quarterly business review with my account rep and their boss, my purchasing director and his subordinate. And we would meet quarterly, not with every vendor,
Hmm.
but the strategic ones, the ones where we're spending tens of millions of dollars. We want them to know. What do I want them to know? What are our goals and aspirations? I
Hmm.
want them to know that. Two, how can they help me? How can they help us? What new stuff do you bring to the table that could help us? Then, if we're working with you, set and manage those expectations. When should I expect things? What should I expect? Service level agreements or whatever. And then don't show up without having scoured our website, looked at our mission, our values, our priorities. Do your homework before you come. And so being on both sides of the desk, I think someone said people don't talk about vendor relations very much. That's something that is going to be really useful to me.
Brad, like, if you want to kind of reflect on your leadership back, is there a moment of failure or a setback uh, that turned out to be kind of an inflection point in your leadership journey?
I would say it was my first year at the university, 2009, and it was H1N1 swine flu.
Hmm.
And the president and leadership asked, could we go online? And I had to say no. We were totally unprepared to go 70,000 people online. Remember, equipment 8 to 10 years old, a buggy learning management system,
Hmm.
email system 18 years old.
Hmm.
And that was not a happy feeling. It was a horrible feeling.
Hmm.
And it frankly scared me
Hmm.
and really redoubled our efforts to make modernization a key priority for the next 8 years. But I had to say no.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that was tough.
Yeah. And how do you personally define success in leadership? And for you, has that definition evolved over a period of time or has it been very consistent?
I'm sorry.
How do you personally define success in leadership?
Oh, yeah. Helping your teams, whether it's your customer team or your organization team be successful time and time again and self-reliant. I think you can't do it yourself, and it's a team sport. And I think once a team is successful, that breeds more success. And we would celebrate success. When we retired the 18-year-old email system, we actually had a party. We had pizza, we had cake. We were so happy to for the learning management system, we actually had a mock funeral. And I had a gravestone with rest in peace on it. And all the teams who worked on that transition, we celebrated. And I brought the boss in, he could thank him. So helping your teams be successful multiple times, get rid of the roadblocks, help them be self-reliant. I can't make all the decisions. And, early on, some of my direct reports would bring me these issues that they had with another direct report. And I said, well, what did they say when you talked to them? Well, they hadn't talked to him. And I said, well, you don't want me opining because I don't know anything about it. Why don't you go work it out? And then they learned not to bring their problems to me without first trying to resolve it themselves. Sometimes you need to escalate, but I wanted to create that self-reliance, and you have to model that behavior. The other thing I modeled, which was no emails 24 hours a day. I would take vacations. I would put people in charge when I was gone that wanted to be CIOs someday. I would stay home if I was sick. I would go to the doctor. If the kid had a school play, I'd go to the school play. And what I said to the organization is, we have 330 people here who will cover for you. So you need to take care of your family, and we'll take care of the rest. I can't compete. I live in Austin, Texas. All the high-tech companies are here. And startups, huge startup culture. Well, I can't compete with that, but I can compete on quality of life. You're working for a great mission. You're surrounded by all these exciting, smart people, faculty, and students. So what you're doing every day has meaning. And gosh darn it, after 8 hours, leave or work from home for 8 hours. We were hybrid before hybrid was cool.
Right. So, Brad, you really had such a multidimensional career, right? You have had so far. So, what's next for you? Are you thinking about anything?
Well, I have enlisted the help of a woman who worked for me. Actually, she was the strategic thinking manager who helped me with the IT strategy many years ago. She's a consultant now. I hired her to help me build a 1-hour interactive session on the principles in the book and a half-day workshop. And next month, I'm going to test drive my 1-hour interactive session with an organization here in Austin called Austin Forum for Technology and Society. It's about 300 people interested in technology, society, etc. And pro bono, I'm going to offer it for free.
Yeah.
And so I want to do some mentoring, coaching, and workshopping.
Got it. So before we close, I had some fun questions here, and for me to kind of learn. So apart from the book that you have written, what has been your favorite book that shaped your thinking?
So it's a book called Managing Expectations by a woman named Naomi Carten, Karten, and basically she was a psychologist by trade who started working in IT, and she applied her psychology tools and principles to serving customers in IT. And she's the one who coined the term, just say whoa. I literally read that book the day before the partner called and asked for that white paper. And I was scared, but I went ahead and tried it. And I said, whoa.
Yeah.
After I read that book, I never canceled a vacation. I went to training. Remember I said I was bad at setting and managing expectations early in my career? Well, I got really good at it after reading her book. And then I would help my teams. I would give out copies of the book. So read this. It's not War and Peace. It's, a short read. And that changed my life.
And one habit or mindset that has stayed with you through decades of change.
Yeah, I think always keep learning. Always keep learning. Be curious and always keep learning. And, technology comes and goes. You know that. We saw client server come and go, and now we're in the era, the age of cloud, and soon AI, and next will be quantum. So just being curious and be always learning.
And what has been one most underrated skill in modern leadership?
I think it really is relationship building. I think it's undervalued. I don't think people invest enough in it. The payoff is tremendous. I would have my staff meet with their peers and influencers. Each of us meeting 7 to 8 peers and influencers. It was I'd do the same, and it was like a nervous system. You got feedback on how you were doing. They had to know all the priorities we were working on, so the network person had to know about the learning management system.
Yeah.
The learning management system person needed to learn about voice over IP. We all had to be accountable for all the initiatives, and we would pick up rumors. The public safety guys said, Brad, I heard a rumor that you don't have enough diesel in the generator at the data center. I said, well, that's a good rumor. I'll go check. Well, we topped it up every month, and once a year flushed it out. So good rumor, but I was able to nip it in the bud. And for my staff, I said, just put it on your calendar. The people you work with closely your boss once a week, your direct reports once a week, your customers, how frequently you work together. So maybe it's once a month. But just by investing that time, you'll earn so much more back. And I think, people worry about transactions and hiding behind the computer screen, and it can be done hybrid too. It doesn't have to be in person. But it's just taking the time to reach out will pay multifold.
And if you could relive 1 year of your career, which would it be and why?
I think it would be that fixing that troubled project where I became the client. Because, it really gave me an appreciation for being the client. And it was such a huge organization, which totally prepared me for the University of Texas at Austin. And the leadership support was unmatched. I had a great team. In fact, our motto was one team, one jersey. It wasn't the consultants over here and the client over here. We were one team. And just building that, being able to watch the change in culture, from kind of a defeatist attitude to a successful attitude and record of success. That was a great year.
Brad, I know we have hit the top of the hour, so if there is something that we couldn't discuss and that is on your mind that our audience needs to know, what would that be? Is there something for you to share?
Yeah. Same as the professor shared. Get out of your office and let people know you care.
Thank you so much. And I know that you would be sharing the link for our audience to kind of go and buy the book, probably connect with you or LinkedIn or find.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and all the other social media.
It has really been a very insightful conversation for me at least. And I deeply appreciate the time that you gave me today. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate the questions. It's really well thought out. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you.